Hello, revolutionaries. My name is MysterE, and welcome to today's live stream coming to you from YouTube. And yeah, today we're going to be having a look at, as the title suggests, we're going to be. That's interesting. Why is it coming out of this live stream? I don't think this is the right live stream. I'm going back and we're going to start again. All right. Now that should make it much better. There we go. Now, I'm sorry for that glitch. I just want to check that because I think, in the wrong line stream. So, MysterE debates AI. All right. I think I have fixed the problem now. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Today, today we are going to be looking at the idea of the Revolutionary Party. Hello, wings of cheese. I'm glad you missed all those technical difficulties I was having just before. I'm glad you can hear me. Yeah, today, as I was saying, hello, Redbird. I don't think I've seen Redbird in the chat before, but hello and welcome. Thank you, both of you, for saying hello. It's nice to know that there are people, watching and interacting. So, yeah, as I was saying in my introduction, I'm going to be looking today at the idea of the Revolutionary Party. So, an actual party apparatus that is designed to push the revolutionary agenda. I think that this idea. Yeah, what is the reference? 4IS tried to explain it to me like a couple of months ago, but I think it's a YouTuber, a YouTuber or something like that. But I'll have to look into it. Yeah, I want to look at the Revolutionary Party because someone had joined the Discord server just the other day, and they basically suggested they had suggested that I take a look at something called the Revolutionary Communist International, which is obviously a group of revolutionaries, but obviously they're coming from a communist standpoint, and they're opening up a branch in Australia, or trying to open up or expand their Australian division. And so they asked me to go and check it out. And so I thought, hey, let's do that checking out together. Let's actually go and have a look at what the RCI is. So this is what they look like in terms of, this is like their logo and stuff like that. And this is on their YouTube page. So I might just, no. Duplicate it. Let's go back to their website maybe. Or to their channel, their page. Where is it?
In June, hundreds of communists.
Okay, so this is it. The Revolutionary Communist International. And this was recommended to me by somebody who goes along by the name of Stevo in YouTube, but like goes under various other pseudonyms, depending on what social media platform you're interacting with them on. I might also leave soon, but I'll check later because I'm very interested. Thanks for showing up, though. I appreciate the solidarity. But yeah, we're going to be looking at the Revolutionary Communist International. So it's this group here. Like an introduction to them is kind of this is the channel of the Revolutionary Communist International, a revolutionary organization with a presence in over 60 countries. So, not a small organization. Our main website and YouTube channel, the world's foremost source of Marxist theory and analysis. I think one of their main members is like kind of the curator and the curator of like a big Marxist website, which produces, Marxist literature and all that sort of stuff. For years, we have consistently defended the Marxist method and revolutionary ideas against falsifications and slanders by the bourgeois media. So it seems like they've probably got their work cut out for them because, let's be honest, falsifications and slanders by the bourgeois media are just, a daily occurrence. They're just part of the class struggle, really. So good luck to them fighting that fight because it'll just, it'll never end. It'll never end. Very common, very common. In Defense of Marxism is not just a website, it's an organization of the Revolutionary Communist International, a revolutionary organization now operating in more than 30 countries. So I'll just quickly go to their Wikipedia because, hey, nothing's official and legitimate until it actually has a Wikipedia page. So there we go. This is important. I think this is important. If you're trying to set your compass on what these people are up to, they are a Trotskyist political international. So I don't know in the chat what type of level we're talking about here, or we're going at in terms of kind of a history and an understanding of sections of the working class movement, especially of the socialist movement. But Trotskyists are those who associate themselves with the political ideologies of Trotsky, who was a instrumental player in the Russian Revolution. You could easily make the argument he was as important as ye old Lenin himself. Like not just for like the October Revolution, but like the revolutionary movements that preceded the October Revolution in February and in 1905, 10 years before they really changed the entire country and then that whole eastern part of Europe. And like he was instrumental also in the sense that not only was he a prolific writer on Marxist and revolutionary ideas, but like he basically led the Red Army and the Red Guard, which was no small task. He led the Red Army basically, and start a revolution. All the capitalist countries around the world decide, hey, we're going to take you out. You've got counter-revolutionaries within your nation as well. And you basically have all of these forces that are working against you. And, Trotsky was the head of the military presence in the Civil War that fought off and beat back the counter-revolution. So, don't get me wrong. Being the leader of the party is very important, but you cannot understate his contribution to the Russian Revolution and the formation of the USSR. It's just, you can't understate it. Whether you like him or you hate him or you think that he was just a sore loser because he didn't win out in the arms struggle with Stalin or whatever your gripe might be with Trotsky. Not Trotskyists, that's another thing altogether. But whatever your gripe might be with Trotsky, you cannot understate like how significant his role was in all of that. I'm fine with the Trotskyists. I find it weird that they keep on saying that they are the true followers of Lenin when Lenin himself would disagree. Ah, well, that's a whole, series of content and a few live streams worth of debate right there. So yeah, good point though, because like yeah, Lenin and Trotsky did not see eye to eye. Like for the longest time, like right up until basically I think the eve of the Russian Revolution, like Trotsky was not on board with the whole Bolshevik thing. So like it was very late that he came to the party and decided to, go along with Lenin's ideas and stuff like that. And even then, like, they obviously were both strong characters and they would have had their own opinions on things, even though I think they saw the benefit of being able to come together at the right points in time, obviously, to be effectual from a revolutionary standpoint. Let's put aside the ideological differences, our interpretations of Marxism, etc., etc. How do we actually bring forward the revolution, and when do we strike? And Lenin was pretty across what the um, what the best time was to really seize an opportunity. Lenin was all about seizing a good opportunity. And I think Trotsky must have seen that, and that's why he probably decided to join the Bolsheviks in their endeavor. And that would have, solidified his place at the top of the hierarchy, and given him that position as head of the Red Guard, the Red Army themselves. I'm not a fan of Trotsky. Look, it's interesting that I'm getting this feedback because I don't hear this a lot. Unless like I'm hearing this from, hardcore tankies or something like that. Um, you know, I get it. I get why people are skeptical because I am very skeptical of Trotskyists, to be honest. They seem to have kind of proliferated across the international scene, especially due to the rise of Stalin. So, in opposition, in contradiction to the forces of Stalinism, you have this like response, this counter response, this reaction to Stalinism, and that is kind of led by the antithesis of Stalin, who was Trotsky. So everyone who's kind of rallied behind communism and socialism as an idea, but want to separate themselves from what was going on in Stalinist Russia or Stalinist the Soviet Union, they kind of align themselves with Trotsky. And so Trotskyists have taken kind of this leading role in the movement outside of the Soviet Union, and like they've done some questionable things over the years and as organizations. And so like you can't lump them all in the same basket, but like they can be very dogmatic, and like sometimes that is a problem. It acts as it holds back movements because it becomes all like bureaucratic and hierarchical, and you have to be one of them if you really want to be a socialist or a revolutionary and all this sort of stuff. So it's not also always conducive to being progressive. Trotsky was actually closer to Rosa Luxemburg than Trotsky, than maybe you mean than Lenin. But there was definitely not a much hate on Trotsky coming from Lenin. Okay, MysterE, tell them the story of when we met Trotskyists at the conference. Dogmatism can be reactionary, and it bloody can. And sorry, I didn't acknowledge you 4IS before when you said, yo, what's up, give up the rock. That's right. Yo, 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 what's up, give up the rock. Yeah, okay. I want to talk about. Okay, so myself at 4AS, you probably heard this story before. I've referenced it a couple of times, but if you haven't, myself and 4AS went along to a conference in Sydney, Australia, a Marxist conference, basically. No, no, all good. Yeah, went along to a Marxist conference in Sydney. It was held at the University of Sydney, and we went along and like we found a poster basically on the street, and like when we got to the conference, the people were kind of like, what are you doing here? And we were like, oh well, we thought that this was kind of a public event. And they were like, yeah, it is. But like, did somebody invite you along to this? And we were like, well, no, we saw your poster and we bought tickets. And they were kind of like, that's weird. And we're like, well, isn't that a good thing? Like, that's why you advertise. You want people to come in off the street kind of thing, learn about Marxism, learn about being a socialist, all that type of fun stuff. And then we're very, very suspicious of what we were up to. I guess they must have been infiltrated by right wing, douchebags that just want to ruin the conference or something. But anyway, they were very skeptical of us. They really didn't want to leave us alone. So we had basically an escort the entire day. We had two people that were just following us around, and like we at like certain intervals after lectures and all that sort of stuff, you'd sit on the lawn and you'd have chats to people about theory and history of the socialist movements and stuff. And like we were bringing up stuff about Stalin, and people were like, oh, we don't really talk about that stuff here. And we're like, well, like, it's good to just like analyze this stuff, isn't it? Just to, learn from history, all that sort of stuff. And they were kind of like, no, 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 you don't get it. We don't talk about that stuff here. We're Trotskyists, or this is a Trotskyist organization. And we were like, oh, okay, our bad, sorry, kind of thing. But like it was very much for the entirety of that day, we were followed around. We weren't allowed to get out of the sight of like the main party people. And they were very, very rigid in their responses to things. You could see that there was a very clear hierarchy in this particular organization. And like 4IS said something, there was a kind of sucks when political organizations become fan clubs. Yes. There seemed to be a few people at the top that were kind of the brains of the operation and like, I guess had all of the character and so it was a little bit of a cult of personality type situation going on. Now, I'm not saying that this is, all Trotskyists are like this, but there is a tendency in these types of organizations to tend towards a cult of personality. So they're just centered around this one group of people that kind of do all of the stuff, and everyone else is just along for the fan club kind of experience, if you know what I mean. And there's the in crowd, and everyone wants to get in on that. And so, like, it's really funny, and just like, I'm divulging a lot, I digress a lot, but like, 4IS actually had a chat with one of these people in the inner circle at the end of the day. I don't know how we got close to this person. We must have just been given the introduction kind of thing in passing. But yeah, here it is. 4IS brought up the idea of permanent revolution. So that's a book, one of Trotsky's books. And in it, there's a particular section where he references the Australian Labor Party. And we all know, or maybe you don't know actually, but in Australia, socialists or socialist organizations are very, very anti the Labor Party because they think it's a bourgeois organization. They don't think it has any connection to the labor movement or anything like that. It's just, it's part of the bourgeois parliamentary system. And so they're very anti the Labor Party, and they were hardcore Trotskyists, right? And like, they all seem to know everything about Trotsky or everything about the Russian Revolution and history and socialism and all that sort of type of stuff. And 4IS was like, but isn't it funny how like even Trotsky in permanent revolution was kind of like, oh, the ALP, the Australian Labor Party, he was singing their praises as a fine socialist organization and like, wanting to see more of this type of stuff happening across the world. Trotsky was praising the Australian Labor Party. And this guy was like, I don't think so, like kind of thing. And like 4IS is like, it's in the book, look it up, man. And he was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to maybe have to go home and read that. So like, I don't know if these guys were very heavily into actually being acquainted with Trotsky's work, or they just liked to call themselves socialists and Trotskyists because it's kind of like as you described, kind of a fan club kind of thing. So like it was a funny experience and unfortunate at the same time because like, you want to see these organizations doing real work and like doing the right thing and stuff like that and not getting caught up in like, religious zeal, right? It's not a religion. It's a political organization. and it's like a revolutionary movement. There's a clear intent, and like if you're rigid like a religion and like you think of things dogmatically, like you are not going to get anywhere. Like you get to a certain point and then it all comes crashing down. You need to be able to adapt, and you need to look at the situation in front of you, and that's what Lenin would teach. And like that's where Lenin would be different to potentially Trotsky or Trotskyists, because like you got to adapt to the situation in front of you and play the game, like real politic kind of stuff. If you know that reference, um, man, imagine like not even being a revolution, like going to that to learn about Marxism. Like if you have no idea about it and then you get followed, it was strange. Now, like I said before, I preface it, maybe they've had some infiltration before by some right wing lunatics, and like when they do their speech, someone gets up and I don't know, throws paint at them or like because we saw that at the end of the day, like someone broke into the conference. There was some crazy person. I don't know what they were trying to do, but they were just saying, "Oh, Marxism is stupid" and all this sort of stuff. So they must have seen it outside a drunk university student and thought they'd come in and say something. But it was off-putting, and it would turn people off, being revolutionary or being socialist or anything like that. If like, it's got to be like in the group or not. See you later, Wings of Cheese. Thanks for joining. Same thing with the Maoists and the Workers' Party in Brazil, I think. I've seen some people in communist Discord server that would have staff making apology notes every time someone higher up disagrees with their opinions. Wow. Wow, isn't it interesting though? Like socialism, like, if you look at it like just really basically, okay, it's supposed to be all about this, democracy and like, yeah, like, giving like power back to the people and like the equalization and like all this sort of stuff. But like these sects, these groups and stuff like that, they become really hierarchical. It's like having I don't know, a particular group that you roll with in high school or something like that. Hello, hello. I'm gonna try and pronounce your name. B.S. Un Undergoets. I'm sure I butchered that, but welcome and thank you for saying hi. It's nice to know who's here and who's interacting and all that sort of stuff. So thank you. Thanks for joining. We are talking, if you're wondering why I'm going on a rant, beasts and gods. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God. Beasts and gods it is. If you're wondering what I'm ranting about, I'll plug the Discord. Okay. Yes, 4AS. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me to do my job. It's from Aristotle. Oh, okay. Interesting. I have to check out this reference. Yes. What I was talking about was basically we're just going through. I've been put on the case by somebody in the Discord server about going and checking out this organization called the Revolutionary Communist International. They're going to start up a group in Sydney in Australia, and like they said, look, go check out this organization. And so we're investigating. We're going to do it together because I don't do it alone. And so like talking of Discord, and 4AS is right, I should plug it. If you are interested, you like this type of content, you want to be part of this chat and all that sort of stuff, this conversation continues on Discord. So like I'm going to give you the link. Please go over to Discord and join up. It's a chill conversation. It's really chill. It's not like this hierarchy stuff that is being talked about in the chat where like you have to apologize to all of those people that are superior to you. I don't even think we're that sophisticated in terms of like having, wait, I'm just gonna find the invite. Is that right? Yeah, I don't even think we're that sophisticated by having hierarchies in there, but like, maybe one day we'll get really sophisticated and do that. But in the meantime, go enjoy the Discord if you want to continue to chat and like to have these types of chats that we're doing in live stream format here. However, or anyway, so this is what we're looking at, and we were just going on about like Trotsky history and like, what is it about Trotskyists or Trotsky himself. But like this organization seems to be Trotskyist, and I just think like there's a general current. Like it was either you went with Stalin at one point, or you went with Trotsky. So you supported the Soviet Union, or you thought it could have been done better at that critical juncture where kind of Lenin carked it basically and left the party up for grabs. So anyway, this is the group that we're looking into. I thought we would have a look quickly because like I think this type of stuff is important. I think it's important to have like groups that their role is just like revolutionary organizing. Like I'm not sure if that's what this group does though. It seems like if you have a look at through their page and their content and stuff, it's theory based. It's a lot of theory, and like they have a lot of videos of like conferences. So they hold conferences and stuff like that, and they have revolutionary understanding and consciousness. But like it seems to be more about like education, and stuff like that. So normally you support organizations based on revolutionary potential or based online. If you're asking me, like I don't subscribe to any groups myself. I'm not too keen on the whole sectarian tribal stuff that happens out in the socialist world scene. I think like people kind of join up to groups like as you described before, like as like joining fan clubs or joining social groups because they want to hang out with like-minded people. So they kind of create organizations and they rise and they fall and they change their names, they rebrand and all that sort of stuff. And they become a little bit like, yeah, insular and like they kind of form their own opinions on stuff. And you either subscribe to this party's way of doing things to the exclusion of all others or get out. And I'm not saying that this is what this organization is doing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that's my general sentiment when it comes to these types of socialist groups and parties and stuff like that out there. And so I tend to stay away from them because like I don't want to be limited by somebody else's opinions, and somebody's like code of conduct kind of thing. And they're just like, oh no, if you belong to this group, you have to think this way and you have to accept these principles and push this the party line here kind of thing. This is the way we do things around here. I'm much more of a liberal revolutionary, you see, and I will take information and good points from various organizations. I think there's good ways of organizing. I think there's good ways of doing theory and learning and practicing, and then I think there's bad ways. And like if you subscribe to something and give your heart over to it and like sign on the dotted line, you have to make sure that like it really agrees with your ethical standpoint, the way that you see the world, your ideological standpoint, before you just sign up to it because like you want to be part of that group and that trend. um yeah, I think that's a good point. That's how I describe myself. Like until like I find something that's just like, yeah, that's me down pat. I just tell people when people ask me, I'm just like, yeah, I'm anti-capitalist. Because like I do think that capitalism needs to be changed. It needs to be revolutionized. So I'm anti-capitalist. I don't know if I can really describe myself as anything else. Even Marxist, like people are just like, oh, you're obviously a Marxist. I'm like, I don't know about that. I love Marx's work, his teachings, his understanding of the world, but I don't know if I call myself a Marxist. Like I know many people use these quotes. I don't know if it's true or not. Normally the sectarians just split 100 times till they get a bunch of little groups with like 10 people. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. And like, that's pretty much the tendency of these types of groups is like they fracture and they, turn into little cliques and in groups and stuff like that. So like I'm usually not too involved with them and I don't like to get involved because like I don't want to get caught up in like that sort of level of politics, like the in-group politics. I'd like to get into bed with the bigger form of politics, the revolutionary politics, the change, let's change society kind of politics. And I know you can't do that without organizing, but like the organizing, the in-group politics kind of gets in the way, I find, which is unfortunate. But I'm not against people organizing and joining up to groups. Just make sure it aligns with your values as opposed to just doing it because there's a bunch of friends that you have in there or something like that, or you're trying to impress someone or something like that. Um, So yeah, anti-capitalist all the way, and like not even a Marxist, because like yeah, apparently Marx famously said, I have to fact check this or find the quote myself. I am not a Marxist. That's what Marx said, and I think there's a lot of insight in that statement, which is just like this is not a this is not Marx's work is not a train like a thought process that you can subscribe to and just be told, okay, this is how you think. You have to read his stuff and analyze it for yourself. It's really difficult, but it's so important because it's philosophical, right? It's not like the Ten Commandments in the Bible or something like that. It's not codified law. Where you're just like, just refer to that one. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the answer to this question. No, Marx gives us like a theoretical framework. He gives us like a dialectical way of thinking, and he's just like, this is what was happening in the 1850s, and I'm pretty sure this is like a general rule and a theme that runs throughout capitalism, but it'll change and it'll develop over time. So your job is to take this level of understanding, this way, this framework of looking at things, and apply it to your own situation. Good luck. And that's what Marx was trying to teach. So to be Marxist is kind of redundant in a way, because like it insinuates that there is a set structure of beliefs or assumptions, and they aren't really changeable. They don't move. And that is really undialectical. Like that is like the antithesis of dialectics. And so like I find Marx, so saying that you're a Marxist is kind of weird in a way, because I don't know if Marx would have really been down with that. So anyway, again, another rant. I'm sorry to keep ranting and doing this to you, but like, here we are down the rabbit hole. So anyway, this is the Revolutionary Communists. Here's their flag. Looks great. They've done a rebranding exercise recently. They used to be called another name. And so like I am all for anything that has the name revolutionary in it. I think it's really important. So let's quickly go and have a look at a video of theirs when they rebranded recently. So this was in 2024. I'm pretty sure they changed their name from being current name Revolutionary Communists, IMT leadership. So it was IMT. It's founded by the Committee for Marxist International, Ted Grant. So it was done by South African. International Marxist Tendency. And there's a key player in that is Alan Woods. I think he's one of basically the key organizers for this movement. That name was 2004. Yeah, so that's the old one, apparently. The IMT. Splitters. Marx and Engels themselves corrected their position after the Paris Commune. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's have a quick look at what it is that these guys are going on about at the time they rebranded. This is 4 hours long. We're not going to sit through this, but I thought, at the start they might give us an introduction as to what they're doing. So if anyone in Sydney, Australia, I'm pretty sure the person who told me about this said they are organizing on the East Coast. So if anyone's interested in learning more about the Revolutionary Communist International, then this might be a way that you can introduce yourself to this organization. So let's see what they have to say when they rebranded about what it is that they do. Oh yeah, splitters. We're not the PFJ.
The Revolutionary Communist International.
Just before we get into that, that's a Monty Python reference, right? Tell me, please.
This is a truly historic occasion. It is a milestone in the development of our international. We are proud to stand on the great traditions of the Communist International. We trace our roots far back to the founding days of our movement, when Marx and Engels wrote the great Communist Manifesto. Today we are retying the knot of history, broken by Stalinism, at a time when the world revolution is beginning to develop. And our task is to resolve the crisis facing humanity, the crisis of revolutionary leadership, as the prerequisite for the victory of the world socialist revolution. We regard ourselves not as individual sections of this international. We regard ourselves as an integral part of the world party of socialist revolution. There's never been a better time as now to found this international or refound this international at a time when the lefts, the so-called socialists of the world,
en el que las llamadas izquierdas del
have adapted themselves to capitalism.
se han adaptado al
There's never a better time to raise the genuine banner of communism internationally.
no ha habido un mejor momento para realzar la bandera del genuino.
And that is the reason why a whole series of our sections have renamed themselves Revolutionary Communists.
Y por eso es que acciones alrededor de
Yes, the split scene from the Judean Colosseum. Yeah, it's a funny scene. And there's like that one guy that's by himself, and they're just like, they're laughing at him. That's the sectarianism that we're talking about. Like Monty Python's so prescient. Like, well, not prescient, it was probably happening in their time anyway. They were probably just commenting on what they were seeing, let's be honest. Revolutionary communists. Fun fact. I didn't know this, but Lenin rebranded communism. So like in Germany, I think that was where a lot of the workers or the serious workers movement was going down, like prior to the October Revolution in Russia. They were all social democrats, like in Germany and stuff like that. The socialist movement and the massive working class political organization. They like deliberately called themselves social democracy, meaning like, you know, workers democracy, the representation of the workers class, the working class, and that's why the word social was in there. So social, they were proponents of social democracy, which is another word for, I guess, socialism, or, you know, lower stage communism, however you want to describe it. And Lenin, to kind of separate I guess the Bolsheviks from these social democrats and stuff like that, the Mensheviks and the social revolutionaries and all that sort of stuff, he revived the word communism, which kind of hadn't been, or the Communist Party ideal that hadn't been really used since kind of, I think Marx and Engels were doing their, having their spin with the International Workingmen's Association. So Lenin kind of, to separate himself from the German socialists and that massive movement and make it kind of his own, or, you know, more Russian, let's say, he started calling it communism again. He started talking about the Revolutionary Communist Party and wanting to institute a communist party and a communist revolution and all that sort of stuff. So it's very interesting how, like, this type of, you know, rebranding exercises, and like, you know, creating terminology that suits the movement kind of thing, or captures people's hearts and minds at the time, is very, very important. Even today, like, nothing's changed. It's very interesting. So like, and Lenin was great at this. Lenin was not only a great propagandist, a great revolutionary organizer and stuff like that, but like, he understood the psychology of you know, branding and you know, terminology and how to use that effectively. So yeah, it's interesting that, like, if it wasn't for Lenin kind of thing, we wouldn't be really calling this all, you know, communist revolution stuff. We'd be calling it social democracy revolution stuff, as opposed to focusing on the communist side of things. That was kind of dropped off for a bit. Interesting piece of history for you. Had no idea.
nacional se han cambiado el nombre por el Partido Comunista Revolucionario.
And at the end of this week, at the end of our deliberations,
Y al terminar esta semana, después de nuestras discusiones,
we will take a vote
vamos a votar
to establish the Revolutionary Communist International.
para establecer la internacional
And we will
revolucionaria.
broadcast this to the world.
Todo lo vamos a hacer a todo el mundo.
I would like to welcome, of course,
Le voy a dar bienvenida, claro,
all those comrades around the world
a
in
todos los
watch
camaradas
parties
que
who are
están alrededor
following
del
our
mundo, viendo
proceedings at this
las
time.
transmisiones
Watch
en
parties.
todo alrededor del mundo.
Online, I believe there are 120 countries of comrades and
It's a good question, right? Like, what would you really like if you had the chance to do this whole rebranding exercise? I think about this a lot, right? Because of like, the Red Scare and, McCarthyism and like, I don't know, even neoliberalism to a certain extent. The word working class is like a dirty word. You definitely can't say communist or communism or anything like that without people thinking of, I don't know, crazy state control and I don't know, Big Brother and like surveillance state and all that sort of stuff. So communism is out of the lexicon. Like I'm talking about for the general population here. Socialism is out. They're basically just tied together, the word socialism and communism. So they're as dirty as each other. So like, yeah, what would social democrats call themselves today? Like, how would you rebrand that one? How would you pull that out? Like if you were sitting with a marketing team right now and they're all just like, oh, okay, we've taken a beating now for the last 100 years. We really got to rebrand and we're going to call ourselves something new, something sexy that the people really like. Like that's why I just like to refine everything down to just revolution, because like revolution still has a level of appeal to it, a rather broad level of appeal, and it seems to have popular culture appeal. Like you see a lot of kind of weird popular culture references to the like revolutionary struggles and revolutionary movements. Like it happens in Hollywood a lot. Like they talk about, like they show a lot of movies where there's some type of dystopian future or something, and then there's some like uprising of the people and they overthrow the system and they all are liberated and all that. So the revolutionary fire and the enthusiasm for revolution in terms of the term itself hasn't been hijacked completely and destroyed by endless propaganda campaigns where like the words communism and socialism have been. So I think if you were really rebranding it, you'd be wanting to call yourself revolutionary in some point. Like I remember when Bernie Sanders was like running, I'm pretty sure in 2016 I think it was, they were talking about like they were calling it the Bernie or the Sanders revolution or something like that. That was actually part of their marketing team. Now I remember hearing someone talk about that, and they said, "Oh, to the people that were running his campaign, they were like, why'd you go down the social, like, why did you go down the revolutionary path with your ad campaign? Because like you're not really revolutionary. You're trying to play within the system. He's running on a Democratic seat, running with the Democratic Party." And like he's really just talking about strong reforms. He's not talking about revolution. And like the guy was just like, yeah, but like you can't really run a political campaign with the words, the Bernie Sanders reform, like kind of thing. It's not sexy enough. If you call it the Bernie Sanders revolution or the Sanders revolution, it's got much more of a ring to it. It's much more attractive to the average punter, the average person out there that's like, turning their mind very infrequently to politics. And like reform is just, yeah, it's just lame. So like you got to go with revolution or something like that. What do we got here? In the West, we need a new perception of what the working class is. Yes, that's like what I was saying. It's been bastardized horribly to reflect all the free, unpaid labor people put into social media and the internet. Holy crap. I talk about this a lot too. I don't know if you've seen any of my content on this, but like, my opinion about like, us creating data for massive tech giants, the data mining industry, and all these third parties like advertisers and insurance companies and like the whole capitalist machine that feeds off our data. We are creating value. There should be a new labor theory of value for the 21st century in the data age. In the information technology age. There should be a new labor theory of value, and like the surplus value that is being created today is the data that you leave behind when you interact with people online, or websites online and apps and all that sort of stuff. We produce a lot of value and we're giving it away for free. I've seen some newspapers calling themselves democratic. I guess this one would not work in the US. Perhaps whatever the rebrand is in the West, middle and working class needs to reflect the new perception of all and who, sorry, perception of all that unpaid labor people put into the internet, and who owns the internet and derives value from all the unpaid labor. It's creating a massive demand deficit for the products that we see on social media. We add so much value to the internet, which we don't get paid for. I think there's like two things I really want to touch on this that should reflect this. That kind of class consciousness needs to be grown 100%. There's two things that really it boils down to for me when it comes to what you're talking about there. Is that one, there is no sovereignty. So the individual has no sovereignty over their personal information. So first we would need to get that type of understanding out there that like this is your information and it belongs to you, and then you can have a conversation from there about getting paid for it, or at least it being considered value because it's owned by you, and then someone else can negotiate for you and pay you, I don't know, a few cents for any byte of data that they steal from you and collect off you. Seize the means of data exhaust. Yeah, data exhaust is such a cool concept, isn't it, for IS? So yeah, revolutionary party. That's why I like it's got the word revolution in it. So a rebranding exercise, I think, would be something that has revolution in it. Like, people are keen on the word revolution, and when I speak to them about it just generally, they're just like, oh, it's a nice idea, but... So like they've already got in their mind it's a nice idea. When you say communism or socialism or something like that, just like, oh my God, you're going to repress me or something like that. Like they're worried about being, I don't know, under attack and their liberties being taken away, which is the exact opposite of what would really be going on there. But propaganda is effective. So you got to give it to the Red Scare. Like they've really changed public opinion, even against the working class, which is crazy, right? Because like, if you have such a large interest group as something as amorphous as the working class, which, transcends national borders and all that sort of stuff, it's very easy to kind of, I guess, divide and conquer that group and make it seem like the working class is not a real thing. It's not real. It doesn't really exist. You're much more than that. You're an individual, and you have like your little community groups all over the place, and you have personal identity and regional specificities, and like regional tastes and local changes and nuances. And so like you can't be put into one big group like the working class. What does that even mean? And so they'd even destroyed the idea of working class, which is unfortunate. I think a good word to battle the fact that working class is like now a term that you can't use. You just say working people or working families. Like no one wants to demonize families or anything like that. And like usually working families are the people that, kind of struggle in the middle class, and they hold a lot of sway over politicians and things like that. What is funny about the Red Scare is that most of the countries with the most acceptance for socialism and communism became the least accepted. Yeah, well, I think it just shows you how hardcore their campaign was, right? Because obviously these movements were growing so much in these countries. And they were really like, look at Germany. Like, they pretty much took power. Like, the Germans were, I don't know, it just was really unlucky how it all unfolded. But like, they were such a strong force politically. And yeah, they really had to shut it all down. And they carved up Germany pretty well, the Americans, after World War II, to make sure that, like, communism didn't really be able to take a hold of mainland Europe, because that's exactly what was coming. Communism was coming. And like the Americans, they were very, very clever in post-World War II Europe. How they went in and they funded stuff, no strings attached. Well, like, like they had to follow the liberal democratic line. That was the string attached. But like, you know, they gave out loans, they helped rebuild under the Marshall Plan, and like all this sort of stuff, which they turn around now and say, oh, look how, you know, altruistic the Americans were. They were just trying to help out their European buddies, and like, you know, help them, you know, rebuild after World War II. And it's just like, no, you only did that because if they stayed in some like hellhole after World War II, they would have radicalized and they would have turned away from global capitalism. And they like, you know, the whole of Europe would be communist right now. And so like that's what the Americans had to do. They had to basically scare the world away from this idea of communism. Because like it was really going to take over the whole of Europe anyway. And like the world would be a very different place now. Could you imagine if all of Eurasia was communist, or communist accepting? Like such a different world. But like, you know, it's all speculation now. Let's continue with the video, shall we? Just see what this guy has to say. And then we're going to get on to ChatGPT and talk about China and socialism, because I want to talk about that. Because like this is always an interesting debate, China, the old China and socialism, because, you know, some people you speak to, oh, they're definitely socialist, and some people you speak to, they're definitely capitalists. So I found the phrase wage earning works too. Yes. Yeah, like making it about like kind of the grind itself, being employed and like having to earn a living. I try to focus on that too. Yeah, like my YouTube, like the introduction video to my channel and stuff like that, I try and focus on like the idea of the cost of living and like what an absurd reality we live in, that like it costs to be alive. Like, you know, like, wow, you know, that's so weird. Like, you know, it's such a strange concept. I'm like, comments timed out? I can read your comments. I can go back and scroll up. You can do the same, I think. Yeah, I don't think they're being timed out, but like they don't appear on the screen, like kind of up here, because I've just got like a screenshot, and so you have to actually scroll back through the chat through YouTube. Got retained for some reason. Look, you know, it's just becoming a mainstay on this channel now. Like people will message me on the side or comment on the side, and they're just like, "Oh, I've tried to say the same thing 5 times, and YouTube keeps knocking it back." So, yeah, they're censoring stuff.
Sympathizers following us at this stage.
En línea nos están dando 120 países.
We send you our revolutionary greetings, comrades.
Nosotros les enviamos nuestro saludo revolucionario.
And I would also particularly like to welcome our own gathering here today.
Quiero darle la vida aquí hoy.
And the different sections that are present from, I think, most of the continents of the world.
I love his accent.
But I would like to particularly welcome the comrades.
Does anyone want to guess what accent that is? Anyone? Some type of English accent? I don't know. So good though. It's working class, I guess.
Dedicated comrades from Pakistan, we're here.
Scottish? Scottish? Okay. Whoops. I was well off.
There are many comrades and sections you're represented, and I do want to individually mention them.
Quiero mencionarlos de manera individual.
The comrades from Bolivia. Welcome, comrades. From Brazil. From Colombia.
Well, we should place bets.
From Chile. From Mexico.
I don't think they can actually give us much of a description of what this organization is about, but look, they've got revolutionary in the title, so they're obviously keen on the revolution. I just am sometimes a little bit, you know, like people use the word revolutionary because, like I was saying before, it's good branding and it's sexy. But like, are they pushing for revolution anywhere? Are they organizing in a revolutionary manner? Are they just trying to, spread the good word kind of thing, which is not a problem. It's what I do, spread the good word. But like, I would hope that Scottish maybe, yes. Okay, so I think they've really got a lot of Latin American countries, don't they? Yeah, look, yeah, I hope they actually are working towards some type of revolutionary strategy, like, your Lenins of the world would do. But an international group, it would be very difficult to organize revolutionary movements in such a large organization, unless they all have their own specific strategies, like localized conditions and all that sort of stuff. Something to look into, something that I will look into. I'm not going to bore you with my investigation now, because it'll just be a lot of me just searching through stuff silently, which would not be very entertaining. So I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to put you through that. If you joined last week, so last Thursday, I did a debate with AI. So that AI, when I say AI, I mean like ChatGPT. I did the debate with ChatGPT on China, basically, and like, is China as evil as the Western narrative portrays? And so I want to not continue that exact kind of refuting the Western narrative on China, but what I want to talk about is like whether or not China is socialist, because depending on who you speak to, everyone has different opinions about whether China is, I don't know, capitalist or not. And like, if you hear people that like, hate communism and socialism, and like, love Western cultures or Western culture generally, and see China as a threat, they'll say, hey, they're socialists kind of thing, they're all communists. But like, if you talk to lefties and socialists, like there's definitely no agreement there on what China actually is, like whether it's actually capitalist or not, or whether it is socialist or anything like that. And so let's talk to ChatGPT about this. What defines a socialist state today? That's a good question. So like, socialist state is a term of its own, I would say. So a socialist state, I would say, is something that China really would have been back in the day under like Mao and stuff like that, where you have a political group, like a one party that controls the state and says, oh, we are doing this on behalf of the workers, like kind of thing. And they take control. They have like a tight bureaucracy, and like they do everything, but they call themselves a party that works in the interest of the working class. So a socialist state is that, a state that calls itself socialist, and like everything is run through the state as opposed to the free market. So like planned economies and all that sort of stuff. But like the workers don't actually get involved in how things are organized and run politically. That's a socialist state, and that's definitely not socialism in my opinion. So that's why I want to talk to ChatGPT to see about its thoughts on whether it is actually socialist or not. So state capitalism, not socialism. Yeah, it's like state. I think they tend towards more state capitalism. That's my personal opinion. I know that's very hotly debated. I mean, China is imperialist, and imperialist is a higher stage of capitalism. So I guess they are definitely capitalist. I think Mao's China had a party, way less alienated from the working class because of the mass line. I think it was an upgrade on Lenin's idea of socialism. Okay, well, let's have this debate with ChatGPT. Let's see what she has to say for herself today. Good morning, ChatGPT. Full stop. I would like to debate with you on whether China today has achieved socialism or not. Full stop. I would like you to take up the position that China has achieved socialism, and I will take up the contrary position. Full stop. Can you please open this debate and briefly explain why you think that China today, in the 21st century, is socialist? Question mark. Right, let's see what she has to say for herself. I think it wasn't up here. Why is ChatGPT? Oh, I can't change the voice. And so she sounds feminine to me. However, this is hotly debated too. So you tell me whether you think that this is a feminine sounding voice or a masculine sounding voice. Sounds feminine to me, so I've been calling her a she. However, maybe not in your opinion. So actually, I'll let you tell me what you think ChatGPT sounds like. Not that it's important, but like it just makes it easier for conversation. So let's see what she potentially has come back with.
Certainly, from the perspective that China has achieved socialism, one can argue as follows. 1. Worker and state ownership. While China has incorporated market mechanisms, the state maintains ownership or control over key industries such as energy, telecommunications, transportation and finance. This state-led economic model ensures that the means of production remain under collective ownership rather than private capitalist domination. 2. Poverty alleviation. Over the past few decades, China has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, fulfilling a core socialist goal of improving the material conditions of the masses. The government's focus on equitable development and rural revitalization aligns with socialist principles.
Interesting.
3. Centralized planning and leadership. Through institutions like the Communist Party of China, CPC, the state directs long-term economic and social development goals, ensuring that national priorities such as reducing inequality and achieving technological independence are collectively pursued. 4. Ideological continuity. The CPC frames its governance within the Marxist-Leninist tradition, describing the current system as socialism with Chinese characteristics, a stage in the progression toward full communism. The system is presented as evolving socialism adapted to China's unique historical and material conditions. These points suggest that China has implemented a distinct form of socialism that incorporates market elements to achieve socialist objectives under CPC leadership. Your response?
All right, I will give you my response in a second, but it does sound like a librarian. I like that comment. I think it's even I think it's interesting. After months of using ChatGPT, I found it to be rather sympathetic. So it hardly ever disagrees with me, and I know that I'm not that smart. It's hard to prompt ChatGPT to disagree with you. Yes, and that's why I have to specifically say every time I debate it that it has to take up a contrary position to me, because at the end of the day, I believe that they have trained this large language model as to have more of a customer service interface. And like, you know, that old adage, the customer is always right. It does try to be conversational and non-confrontational. And it ends up with kind of agreeing with what you're saying, which is not good when you're trying to develop an idea and check how robust it is. So yeah, I continually have to say, and you'll notice this when you kind of see maybe some of the other ones where I've debated it, I'm constantly telling it, no, you must take up a contrary position. That's why I've specified at the start as well, I want you to be contrary. But because its context window isn't that great, I have to remind it as well that I want it to take up a contrary position so I can develop my arguments. It's really important when you talk to any LLM that you're specific about what you want it to do, because like it will kind of fill in the gaps and just do what it's natively trained to do. That's what I find when it comes to old AI. Now, like in terms of its response, you know, it's not that great. Like the workers one, like we're going to go through each of these individually. I'll respond to it, but like just briefly, like the workers' ownership of stuff. Like I think there's a distinction between like what. I wonder what the answer would be to, is China a dictatorship? Well, let's ask it that actually, and then we'll come back to this. That's a good question. That'll be entertaining. Thank you for your response. Before engaging in the debate, can you please answer? Oops. Please explain whether China today is a dictatorship or not. Please be as brief as possible. I only ask it to be brief because sometimes it can give you pages and pages of response and it's not always enlightening. So if you can try and get to be a little bit more concise, it gets to the point a little bit better. Unless you want me to divulge more, just let me know.
Whether China is considered a dictatorship depends on the framework used to define the term. From a critical perspective, China can be described as a dictatorship in the sense that it is a one-party state led by the Communist Party of China, CPC, which monopolizes political power and suppresses dissent. Decisions are centralized, and the CPC exercises extensive control over the judiciary, media, and civil society, limiting pluralism and opposition. However, the CPC argues that its system represents a dictatorship of the proletariat, as per Marxist theory, where state power is wielded on behalf of the working class to maintain stability, achieve development, and protect socialism. This characterization frames it as fundamentally different from authoritarian regimes that serve capitalist interests. Thus, China's system reflects elements of centralized, non-democratic governance, but whether it qualifies as a dictatorship depends on one's ideological lens.
Talk about a sitting on the fence response there. Thank you, ChatGPT. See, this is why you have to be specific about kind of how you expect it to respond. Like, if you wanted to tailor the response better, you would say, take up a position and argue as to why you've taken up that position. That's how you could get it to, like, kind of not sit on the fence with its response. So yeah, it depends on what framework you use to describe what a dictatorship is. Interesting evasion of the question there. So let's go back to their points. Like, let's just talk about, I'm going to attack dot point number 1, obviously first, and then like we'll go through these ones to see. I mean, the Chinese government itself would say yes. Well, they would. And like, she described it as the dictatorship of the proletariat. So they would say it's a dictatorship, but they would say of the working class. And so it's not a dictatorship in the kind of romanticized Western perspective, which is just some dictator for life who goes against the wishes of the people and controls arbitrarily. But yeah, so the workers and state ownership. So while China has incorporated market mechanisms, the state maintains ownership of the control over key industries, energy, telecommunications, transport, finance. This state-led economic model ensures the means of production remain under collective ownership rather than private capitalist domination. All right, let's respond to this one then. Okay, considering point number 1, full stop. It would seem that you are making the argument that socialism has been achieved simply because the state has a level of ownership over key industries. Full stop. And this is representative of a form of collective ownership because it is in public hands as opposed to private domination. Full stop. I don't think that you can equate collective or public ownership of key industries within a national economy to socialism. Full stop. Socialism, at its core, is two things. Full stop. One, a transitional step on the way to a communistic society. Full stop. And two, it is when the workers control the means of production. Full stop. Hence the old adage, seize the means of production. Full stop. Accordingly, and using those parameters, I do not think that you can say that socialism has been achieved by 21st century Chinese society simply because they have a state-led economic model. Full stop. Can you briefly respond, ensuring that you take up a contrary position if necessary? Full stop. Oh, wait. All right, let's see what she has to say. Gotta go. We'll def come back to watch the rest of this stream later. Have a nice day. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate your interaction. It really makes a big difference. Thank you very much. See you later. All right, so let's see. We've got 4 people watching at the moment. I might just do another quick plug before we hear her answer. If you are interested in joining conversations like this, please join us on Discord. I will put the Discord link in the chat. And also, if you are interested in financially supporting, please go over to my Patreon. And yeah, please, there's different tiers and levels of financial support that you can give if you are interested. Here's the link. If not, if you cannot financially support, that's not a problem. Just go up and become a member for free, because I've got a better communication channel over there, much better than what I have on YouTube, because like YouTube just doesn't notify people of everything, but like I can get you via notification over on Patreon. So please go and join up there. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say for themselves.
Your critique raises valid theoretical points, but the counter-argument that state ownership in a socialist framework inherently reflects collective ownership, as the state is meant to represent the interests of the working class under Marxist governance. In China's case, the state-led economic model, guided by the Communist Party of China, CPC, ensures that profits from key industries are reinvested in public welfare, infrastructure, and national development. While workers do not directly control the means of production, the CPC claims to act as the vanguard of the proletariat, implementing policies that align with collective interests. This differs from capitalist state ownership, where such industries may serve elite or private interests. The Chinese model reflects a stage of socialism tailored to its material conditions, aiming to balance collective ownership and market efficiency while advancing toward greater worker empowerment in the long term.
Well, it was an interesting response. Like, I guess they have a point, or she has a point when she's talking about it being a potential stage of socialism to tailored to the material conditions. Like, this is how they're doing it. But like, it's only running on the assumption that the Communist Party of China is actually working in the interests of the working class and not in its own interests as like its own bureaucratic machine, its own political entity. And like, if it has like unequivocally and reservedly the interests of working people only and not the interests of people in the bureaucracy and stuff like that, then like, fine, you could make an argument for that it's a stage of socialism. But how the hell do you ensure that? Who's policing the police? Like, kind of thing. Who makes sure that they are, you know, only there for working class interests? I think that's worth talking about with her before we go on to another point. Your position on this matter seems to be running on the assumption that the Communist Party of China is definitely or unequivocally representative of the interests of the Chinese working class. Full stop. And furthermore, based on this assumption, that because it provides social benefits like infrastructure and welfare that is taken from state-led enterprises, that this constitutes a form of socialism. I do not agree with the premise that the party definitely represents the interests of the working class and not its own self-preservation as a independent political organization. Full stop. How do you respond to this? Question mark. Please take up a contrary position where necessary and be as brief as possible.
Your skepticism about the CPC's representation of the working class is understandable. However, the contrary position argues that the CPC's legitimacy as a representative of the working class is evidenced by its track record in poverty alleviation, economic development and social stability, all of which benefit the majority, particularly workers and peasants. The CPC positions itself as a vanguard party, asserting that its long-term planning and centralised decision-making are necessary to guide the nation towards socialism. While self-preservation is a feature of any political organisation, the CPC's emphasis on improving material conditions and addressing inequality supports its claim to act in the collective interest, aligning with socialist objectives. Ultimately, while not a pure worker-controlled model, the CPC framework maintains that it is advancing socialism through practical governance rather than idealistic immediacy.
All right. I think we're at a stalemate here in the sense that they keep driving home the fact that because there's some, good outcomes, there's some benefits of this. This equals socialism. And like you can have these types of good outcomes like poverty alleviation, economic development, social stability under capitalism. Okay, you can have systems where you set up like a welfare state and like good governance to ensure that you alleviate poverty. You have economic development. That's what capitalism does. It's all about economic development. And you can have long periods of social stability in like a fairly developed capitalist nation that has like the interests of, I guess, the grander population. So none of these attributes here speak to me as being exclusively socialist. Like just because you care for the welfare of your people and stuff like that, and you want to look after them through an economic model and a governance model that does that, that doesn't make you socialist. Okay, for better living conditions for all. What about freedoms? That's a good question as well, actually. Yeah, it's all about economic measures and stuff like that, not about freedoms. That's a very, very good point, actually. Because socialism is supposed to be about having more freedoms for the workers, especially in regards to actually alleviating the need for, round-the-clock labor. It's supposed to actually produce more free time for labor, as opposed to being engaged in capitalist production all the time. It's a good point. So let's go to the poverty alleviation part. I might just briefly touch on this, and see what ChatGPT has to say about that. And poverty alleviation. Over the past few decades, China has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, fulfilling a core socialist goal of improving the material conditions of the masses. The government's focus on equitable development and rural revitalization aligns with socialist principles. Does it? Does it really? That's interesting. All right, let's go with this one. I do not agree that the revitalization of rural lands and equitable development has anything to do with socialist principles. Full stop. I do acknowledge that a core socialist goal is the improvement of the material conditions of the masses. However, this is supposed to be done, led by the workers themselves. Full stop. Through their own political organization and expression. Full stop. It is fundamental to socialism that workers are able to politically organize themselves. Full stop. It is this political organization that develops the working class and leads to a type of society that produces all of the niceties that you have listed here, being alleviation of poverty, better material conditions, and equitable development. Full stop. If you just have a paternalistic political organization doing that for you, the working class, the masses of the population, learn nothing and are simply dependent on the government to survive. Full stop. If something was to happen to the government, then all of these gains could be lost forever. Full stop. Can you please respond to this briefly and take up a contrary position where necessary? Question mark. Please read on the answer. I'll keep my questions aside. Please read on the answer. I'll keep my questions aside. Keep asking questions. Don't be shy.
Your point about worker-led organisation being central to socialism is theoretically sound, but the counter-argument is that the Chinese model reflects a pragmatic adaptation to its historical and material conditions. China's transition from feudalism and semi-colonial status to its current development required a centralised authority to combat underdevelopment and imperialist pressures. The CPC argues that, in this context, sheer state leadership substitutes for direct worker control as a means of achieving socialist goals, including poverty alleviation and equitable development. While dependence on a centralised government may seem paternalistic, the CPC sees its role as temporary and transitional, with long-term goals of fostering political and economic systems that increase worker participation. In this view, improving material conditions lays the groundwork for a more politically conscious and organised working class in the future.
Interesting. So it would seem that your argument is actually alluding to the fact that socialism has not been achieved in modern day China. However, the one-party system has been set up to lay the groundwork for future socialist society to take root. Full stop. The CPC arguing that state leadership substitutes for direct workers' control doesn't mean anything in terms of aligning with socialist principles. Full stop. That is simply an argument that shows that a political organization has taken it upon themselves to tell the people what's good for them. Full stop. There is nothing democratic about that. And essentially, socialism is about democratization. Full stop. Can you please briefly respond to this? If you have any new points to add, and they are based on a contrary position? Question mark. Let's see what she says. A bloody long transition. Yeah, it's still going. But it's still better than anything that the West has tried, let me just say. And that's what people are always arguing about at the moment when it comes to China. Everyone's just like, oh, which is better, you know, the US or China kind of thing. And you're starting to see this shift towards like people's ideological framework, and they're just like, oh my God, maybe China's doing capitalism better and all that sort of stuff. So an interesting one. Democracy is supposed to occur at the workplace in a socialist one-party state. The one party is supposed to reflect the economic interests of the one economic class they're working towards. Yeah, it's supposed to. It is. It is supposed to. I get it theoretically. I do. I just don't know if that's what happens in practice.
Your critique highlights the tension between socialist principles of democratization and the CPC's centralized authority. However, from the contrary position, The argument is that the CPC's model prioritizes outcomes over process during the transitional stage. The party claims that democratization without addressing foundational inequalities and developmental disparities risks devolving into instability or reverting to capitalist dominance. The CPC also contends that its governance incorporates elements of democratic socialism through consultative mechanisms, such as the National People's Congress and mass organizations, which aim to reflect public needs. While not worker-led in the traditional sense, this framework seeks to balance efficiency with inclusivity, arguing that democratization can only flourish once material conditions are stable and class contradictions are sufficiently resolved. This staged approach aligns, in the CPC's view, with Marxist principles adapted to China's unique historical trajectory.
Okay, I think that's an interesting point. Okay, so this aligns with the scientific socialism, right? So like getting towards socialism and taking a transitional period, and like taking transitional measures in order to make sure that there is the material conditions in society to allow for a democracy to actually flourish and develop in the way that you would expect democracy to do so. And yeah, you can't have that when you have like large disparities between classes, large inequalities, large inefficiencies between regions and stuff like that. And so you must develop it at a certain point to allow democracy to really take root. And like, I believe that, I really do. But like, when does the party take, let go of the reins, right? That's always the ultimate, question when it comes to absolute power. Absolute power, they say, corrupts absolutely. So like, when does the CCP turn around and say, all right, we're done, you take over now? Like, we've gotten to a certain level, like everyone's pretty well off now, they're catered for, the system's set up so people have a good standard of living, and like there's good infrastructure. Like, when do the people take over? And when does the bureaucratic machine, that is the one party state, when does that step down? And I think that is the trillion-dollar question. Then at the workplace, one gets democratic input to what gets done and how it gets done, but not about private property. Technical question: how do you get that voice out of ChatGPT? Like I said before, I can't change the voice, but there's a little symbol down the bottom here next to the responses. Can you see that little speaker? Oh my God, you can't see that. I'm sorry. Can you see that little speaker symbol there? I just pressed that, and she supposedly reads aloud, apparently. So sometimes it's much nicer. Like if you're having a big conversation with ChatGPT and you're sick of reading, you just press that for a little bit so you can, just sit back and listen as opposed to having to read through it. Because yeah, sometimes it gives voluminous responses. And it's nice to have someone like, read it out to you. So that's how I got there, if you're wondering. All right, so let's go back. I think we've done that point to death in the sense that like, I don't think ChatGPT has a real response for that. Like, honestly, like a proper response to that. It's just means tested. It's just like, yeah, but they're getting results. So that's socialism. And like, getting results is not a bad thing, but is that socialism? Like, honestly. So seems like I can't send anything. Oh, I can. Yeah, people have been having difficulties with this. You are not alone, apparently. Centralized planning and leadership. Through institutions like the Communist Party of China, the state directs long-term economic and social development goals, ensuring that national priorities such as reducing inequality and achieving technological independence are collectively pursued. Look, again, like just centralizing stuff in the state, okay, and making sure that there's development goals that everyone's working towards, and that, everyone's working on the same priorities and stuff. That's central planning, okay. And central planning is important because it's like antithetical to the free market. So it's antithetical to this idea of the anarchy of the market, where you plan nothing and just let the market do it, and the invisible hand will come in and regulate everything. And so like exchanges will happen between two parties on an equal basis, and like the effects of production will match the needs and the requirements of the distribution process, and therefore consumption patterns in the population. That's what the free market spouts, kind of thing. But like like, and central planning is kind of the antithesis of that. It's like, no, distribution production is not just going to meet consumer demand. Let's figure out what that consumer demand is and plan towards it. And let's kind of direct our productive capacities in the right way. Let's like direct our energies, kind of thing. And central planning is like a kind of response to the anarchy of the free market. But that doesn't have anything to do with socialism. Socialism is not about central planning stuff, okay? Central planning is a feature of socialist states. And it would be a feature, I'm assuming, of some type of socialist society if we ever got there, because like you would be able to plan stuff because you don't have like the anarchy of the market. But central planning doesn't equal socialism. Like we've said before, socialism is about being like socialized production. Okay, so like a real crash course in all of this stuff. Okay, when capitalism started, one of the wonders of capitalist production was the fact that like the capitalists got groups of people working together that all at one point did individual things and started a product or a commodity from start to finish, and then they introduced like a really structured and robust division of labor. Now, instead of one person basically, or one guild or group making a whole carriage from start to finish, they started getting different people from different industries and different groups and all that sort of stuff to make the seat, and then the wheels and the carriage compartment itself and the leather seats and all that sort of stuff. And when they socially divided the labor, they divided up the labor and got all of that together, it was much more efficient in terms of its productive capacity. And that's what capitalists did really well. They helped the social division of labor work together in a productive way, in a capacity that like the world had never seen before. And so capitalist production based along this social division of labor took the world by storm. But it was that social division of labor which was the force to be reckoned with, as opposed to just the fact that it was capital that was driving that. It was the profit motive that was driving it. However, it was the social production, which was, or the social style, the division of labor, which was the productive apparatus there. It was just being put into motion by capital. So if we could put into motion the social division of labor without the need for capital in motion, so the profit motive, if we could just have that social division of labor without the capital part, then that's what you have in socialism. You have you have a very complex division of labor across a society, because all things are socialized now. It takes everybody in society to make everything work. And you recognize that social division of labor, and you allow all of the workers, all of the people that do all of the stuff, because of the vast and complex division of labor out there, all of those people now, because they're all contributing, they get to make decisions. They control their own workplaces because they know best. And like they come together to organize society as workers in all of this very varied and complex, socially divided society that has all these different labor inputs everywhere, and they all come together and they decide on what they're going to do. And as part of that, you start planning things, and you can start making decisions about what you're going to concentrate your productive capacities on. And that's where the planning comes in. But putting the planning first and saying, oh yeah, let's just centrally plan stuff and that equals socialism, is the wrong way. It's getting it in the reverse direction. You need to acknowledge the division of labor, essentially, that capitalism produces, give power to that social division of labor as opposed to the capital that puts it into motion. Give power to the social division of labor, and then you can start like planning things and moving away from a capitalist mode of production altogether. But you're not going to do that by just centrally planning stuff. What centrally planning stuff is today is just outsmarting capitalism. The Chinese, very clever. They understood that the free market ethos, like just leaving it up to the invisible hand of the market, will get you so far. But like, as capitalists become monopolistic and they become ridiculously power hungry and profit driven and like just, can't help themselves, and they just take more and more and more, it becomes a fetter on society. It holds the society back. So they were just like, let's cancel out some of that ugly stuff in capitalism and plan the stuff we need to plan to keep our independence, and we leave the rest up to the free market. And so they kind of half and half, the Chinese, and they figured it out. And so they centrally plan a free market system. That's essentially what they're doing, as opposed to centrally planning because they've socialized the division of labor and like given democratic control to all people that are involved in production in society. It's got nothing to do with that. There's a big distinction there, and I think it's worth noting. It's definitely worth noting, and it's something that thinks is so worthy of note that I'm actually going to write it down so I can cut this later. So around 140. All right, so let's get on to the last point. I'm not going to go through point number 3 because I don't want to fight ChatGPT and have it give me these general responses. As long as their economy grows at 6% a year and almost everyone's life improves year over year, once that slows down, the drive for freedom will reappear across society again. I think that's a good point, and that's like what the scientific socialist kind of approach is that they're talking about. Like, you know, socialism with Chinese characteristics is like, hey, let's just focus on increasing everyone's living standards, and once the living standards are up, and we're an advanced industrialized nation, the people will be able to basically demand a liberalized way of living. And so you have a more liberal approach to society now because everybody has that expectation because they've got such a high living standard and they live in such an advanced industrial nation that, like, you know, their basic needs are met anyway. So, hey, why not give them a little bit more democratic control? I think that's, you know, that makes sense in theory, doesn't it? Like, you know, that you could do that. But like, you know, the skepticism always comes in when you're thinking about, like, you know, okay, at what point do you say we've achieved that level of wealth and prosperity, and when will the party hand over control to all workers as opposed to just the workers that are associated with the party? That's the $1 trillion question. It's the $1 trillion question. All right, so dot point number 4, ideological continuity. The CPC frames its governance with a Marxist-Leninist tradition, describing the current system as socialism with Chinese characteristics, a stage in the progression towards full communism. The system is presented as evolving socialism, adapted to China's unique historical and material conditions. That's interesting. So let's just copy that. Response. So, acknowledging that the system is evolving socialism is a recognition that socialism has not been achieved, but the Chinese, as a national entity, are working towards a society of that nature. Full stop. Does this acknowledgement not demonstrate that they have not achieved socialism, and more so, they don't even work along socialist principles? Full stop. They are actually a capitalistic society using that system to one day bring in socialism. Full stop. How do you respond to that? Question mark. Please be as brief as possible and take up a contrary position if necessary. Full stop. All right, let's see how she responds. Living standards up, provided only have one job per family. How does that take care of the needs of the population? That's an interesting point. And I've actually heard some, I don't know what you'd call them, geopolitical analysts talk about the demographic issue in China. And like China is like one of the most, if not the most aging population in the world. And it's like a lot of it has got to do with the one child policy, and like kind of the fact that because of the lag time of that policy and like the issues that it's caused, like the population curve, the age graph is like really top heavy now, and like within like 10 years or something like that, the majority of the working population of China is going to be either at retirement age or very close to retirement age, and the replacement levels aren't there. So like all of a sudden you're just going to have this mass group of the working population just retire or finish working, and like there's not enough people in the middle to replace it. And then it gets lower again because they're not really having children either, and so like they can't replace their population. So everyone talks about like how massive China is in terms of its population, you know, like basically being, I don't know, 1 billion people, let's say, give or take a few million at least, or 100 million actually. And like they're going to be like, you know, in 10, 20 years, their population is going to significantly reduce. But like, you know, yeah, I'm talking about Zeihan. Yeah, Zeihan brings that up a lot for us. They had to let that policy down, but it did last them. Yes, and the ramifications of that policy are huge. That's why the population of India is now larger. Yes, it's massive ramifications. But like, you know, talking about living standards and bringing up, you know, if they've brought up their society and they are a well advanced industrialized nation, they've increased, you know, living standards and all that sort of stuff, reducing the population is only going to have kind of more of a positive impact on increasing the living standards if you have to provide for less people. However, if you have less people that are of working age, that is a massive problem. And especially with their economic model, which is like, you know, for the last, you know, so many decades has been like the source of, you know, the world's labor and industry. And so like if the laboring class is about to bottom out and just like cease to exist or be a fraction of its former glory, then there's big problems on the road, and the short road ahead for China that no one really speaks about. Interesting points. Let's see how she has responded.
Your observation acknowledges a central critique of the CPC's claim to socialism, its reliance on capitalist mechanisms like markets, profit incentives and private enterprise. From the contrary position, however, the CPC asserts that these mechanisms are tools within a broader socialist framework employed to build the productive forces necessary for a future socialist society.
Fine, that makes sense.
This approach is rooted in Marxist-Leninist theory, which allows for transitional stages where capitalist elements coexist under state control. The CPC argues that its system aligns with socialist principles by prioritizing collective welfare, reducing inequality, and maintaining state ownership of key sectors,
No, she's already
all
said
while
that.
setting the stage for a more equitable and democratic socialist society in the long term. The debate lies in whether this pragmatic use of capitalism dilutes socialism or strategically advances it.
No, I don't agree. I don't think the debate lies there. I must disagree. I don't think the debate lies there. Full stop. I disagree. I do not think the debate lies there. Full stop. I believe the debate lies in whether or not the CPC will relinquish their power at a point where it can be determined that society can become socialist. Full stop. What mechanism does the CPC have to ensure that the one-party state will not continue its dominance for the sake of control only? Question mark. Can you please respond to this? Question mark. Be as brief as possible and take up a contrary position where necessary. Full stop. The answer is, as always, based on what the CPC asserts, as they have no internal contradiction. We have to take their point as being the truth. Yeah, that's a good point. There's no internal contradiction at all. There's no like self-regulation from within, like some oppositional kind of arm that really poses a threat, and so it keeps them like kind of honest, let's say. Like there are divisions within the party itself, like factions within the party, sorry. And they take like opposing sides to things, and there's, there's leadership spills and like there's tension, but like there's nothing that actually challenges the entirety of the party itself. And I think that's a good point. It's and that's a regulating force within democratic societies or liberal democratic societies that the CCP doesn't really contend with, which is interesting.
From the CPC's perspective, the mechanism to relinquish control lies in the eventual empowerment of the masses through economic and educational development. The CPC argues that its dominance is not for the sake of control, but for maintaining stability during the transitional phase. It views its leadership as a safeguard against external and internal capitalist pressures, aiming to prepare the conditions for a socialist society where governance becomes increasingly democratic. Critics, however, challenge this claim, noting the lack of concrete frameworks or timelines for transitioning to a more pluralistic or worker-led system. While the CPC justifies its authority as necessary for achieving socialism, skepticism arises from the absence of institutional guarantees that the party will not prioritise its own survival over the principles it claims to uphold.
And that's the million-dollar question. That is the million-dollar question. So I'm glad she's finally acknowledged that. I did take I asked her to be contrary position when necessary. But like, yeah, it argues the dominance is not for the sake of control, but for maintaining stability during the transitional phase. And I think this follow-up though is a good point. It views its leadership as a safeguard against external and internal capitalist pressures. I think that's fine. Like we said, we need to control the anarchy of the free market. There's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't make you a socialist by, controlling the free market. That's what, capitalistic societies do all the time. The Western liberal democracies are constantly putting the brakes on the free market because like they need to actually serve the interests of their population, and like capitalism doesn't really just do that. It just does whatever it wants from a market perspective. And so they're constantly trying to safeguard their population against external and internal capitalist pressures. So like, liberal democratic states do that too, and they do it without a one-party system. So it's interesting. There's many ways to skin a cat, it would seem. And the CCP are just specifically choosing to do it in an autocratic way. The opponents migrate to Europe. So it seems that capitalism is more attractive than the transition to socialism. For some, it would definitely seem that way. It would definitely seem that way. Especially if you had a run-in with the CPC, then you'd definitely be choosing the capitalist road and fleeing to Europe somewhere. Maybe somewhere in the French Riviera. Sounds like a lovely region. Or maybe somewhere in Italy, depending on what type of capital they have behind them. All right, so that's it. That's what I wanted to cover today. I really wanted to see, like, what are the main arguments that are in the zeitgeist? Because, like, I think that's important. Like, people are probably sitting there thinking, like, why does China have, like, no industry standards, though? What do you mean by no industry standards? You mean, like workplace standards, or you mean like quality control for commodity production? What do you mean? I'll let you confirm that for me. But yeah, I really wanted to kind of get the zeitgeist on what? Food, construction, cars, etc. Oh, industry standards. Look, I don't know, but I have a industry standards expert in the chat, actually. Mary Ellen might be able to tell us, but like there are international standards on like consumer product production and stuff like that. And so if they want to sell on the global market, China, which they definitely do, as everyone would know, everything's pretty much made in China, or a lot of stuff was. It's changing now. They have to meet they do have to meet standards for whatever they're exporting. Now, if you're talking about internally and they've had problems with their own construction and stuff like that, yes, there has been massive problems with construction and certain development patterns within China. I think that has to do with the fact that they've had to kind of deal with a lot of party corruption as well. So people getting paid off to do certain jobs and they're not doing them to the best of their ability. And so I think the corruption element that comes out of a one-party system has eroded the standards. So it's not like the standards aren't there exactly. It's more like the standards are ignored deliberately because there are party officials out there that are making, some good coin off degrading the standards. Now, let me just say that though. Let's be honest. It's not like that doesn't happen under capitalism or in a free market setting or in a liberal democracy. There are often politicians and big companies in there that are undercutting and doing illegal activities like white collar crime stuff that we're talking about here. And they get a slap on the wrist from the government and say, you've been investigated, don't do that again. And there's some commission into it, and then everyone investigates, and then they say they'll never do it again, and then they'll go back to doing it. So this type of corruption and this bending the rules kind of stuff happens everywhere. Happens everywhere, in my opinion. Wait, Google said no, China does have regulations on buildings, including height limits, safety, but I guess the corruption, true. Yeah, so I think they have the standards. I definitely do think that they have all of that. But it's whether they acknowledge that or implement them. That's the $1 million question. But I'll tell you what the Chinese do compared to what is done in liberal democracies. When a building falls down and kills people, or baby formula or something like that is being produced and it poisons babies and kills all of these babies, the Chinese are not afraid to throw corporate criminals behind bars. And I'll tell you where that doesn't happen: in every liberal democratic society around, bar a few. I think maybe the Nordic countries throw white collar criminals behind bars when they screw things up. But apart from that, In capitalist countries, it's just like, oh, you did the wrong thing and you were caught. Okay, don't do it again. And like, no one goes to jail for like white collar crime or like, basically bringing the world economy to its knees. They just get a slap on the wrist and maybe a fine. So, the Chinese every now and again will systematically go through and, disappear some of their white collar criminals, which is interesting. I guess you can do that with a one party system. But yeah, look, that's what I wanted to cover today. And like I was trying to actually, what I was trying to say before was the LLMs, so the large language models, like basically have access to, a dearth of information from across the internet and other sources. And so like it's representative of the zeitgeist, the general consensus on a topic. And so if you ask it like these types of questions, it's good to have this conversation with it because it kind of represents what people hold as common sense truths about a particular topic. And you can ask it to sit on either side of the fence and it will give you the general common sense view or the conventional wisdom of that side of the fence on a particular topic or that position on a particular topic. So that's why it's interesting debating AI on this, because you're arguing against the conventional wisdom in your chosen topic and from your chosen perspective. So it's very versatile. It's very interesting in that regard. So yeah, look, thank you. I mentioned that China has no animal rights rules though. That sucks. You know what? They have standards, but the standards are less constraining than Western capitalistic countries. Nobody can say they are unhappy with a death toll, which is unacceptable in Europe. Interesting point. There you go. So there's your difference there. So they have standards, but they don't have avenues of complaint and recourse. Yeah, that makes a bit of sense actually. Yeah, the animal rights rules. Look, I think that is your socialism with Chinese characteristics there. I think Westerners and Eastern countries have very, very different views when it comes to animal rights. I think Eastern cultures take a very, very pragmatic approach to animal rights when compared to Westerners, which is interesting because Eastern philosophies are supposed to are much more in tune with the universe and nature as an entity, as opposed to a separate thing like a monotheistic religion, which is like what Western societies are based on. But I think they take different approaches when it comes to animal rights, which is worth noting. So yeah, for all of you who have very kindly joined me on today's adventure and live stream, thank you so much for the interaction. I really appreciate it. Thank you for entertaining me and asking me some good questions and, watching the AI debate live as it stands. I'm going to put in I'm going to do some, usual plugs here. If you can support financially on Patreon, I would really appreciate if you could do that. I'll put the link in the chat for you, so please go over there, check out the tiers, all very reasonable, I think. If not, you can't support financially, there's no problem with that, but like go over there and please join and become a member for free, so I have an open communication channel with you, because YouTube kind of gives notifications to some people but not everyone. I find this to be a real problem, but like if you join for free, you get all the notifications every time I post something interesting up there. And like if you want to have a chat and like continue these types of discussions, please join our Discord. So Jerry Poppins very kindly put together this Discord so we can all like-minded people and not have discussions about like, anything. It's a very chill server. So if you're interested, go join the server and definitely go over and join up on Patreon. Thank you so much, for your time today. Thank you for the company. It's been wonderful. Thank you everyone. And I will do probably another couple of live streams this week in midweek. Tomorrow, the day after, I'll probably do Twitch, and then I'll wrap up the week on Friday with another YouTube live stream, and we'll do another AI debate. But yes, thank you very much for joining. And until next time, please remember, as always, I am, you are, we are a MysterE. I will see you all next time.